Hello, BISC1323. This is the beginning of recorded lecture 2-3, continuing on with seedless plants. So we began the chapter last time and talked about green algae, and we covered bryophytes. Before we get to the next group, there is another umbrella group. This is called Tracheophyta. Members are called tracheophytes. So this is another sort of evolutionary innovation that we're building on. So as you can see, all further groups are going to be called tracheophytes. And yep, here it is on this figure. Ah, vascular, it says, instead of tracheophyte. Well, that kind of gives away what this means. Tracheophytes are indeed vascular plants, as opposed to bryophytes, which were not vascular plants. The vascular system is something that transports water and nutrients in roots, stems, and leaves. We'll talk more about these structures in a couple of chapters when we get to plant physiology, but yep, the vascular tissue transports stuff in the plant. We talked about how that was a problem with these non-vascular plants, but now that we have this vascular tissue, we can have bigger and better plants. Along with that, tracheophytes also have something called lignin present in their cell walls. All plant cell walls have cellulose, but now we start to see this just extra chemical compound. Don't sweat the exact structure, but it's in addition to the cellulose, which just gives more strength to the cell wall of these plants, which makes sense. You're going to grow bigger, bigger and better. Another evolutionary innovation in tracheophytes is, again, real roots with real vascular tissue. They do a much better job of anchoring plants than rhizoids did. And leaves, again, real leaves, not thalli, they can also get bigger. They can have a bigger surface area. They can do photosynthesis better. So real roots, real leaves, major upgrade here. All of these things allow for plants to grow larger. And for plants, larger is usually better because taller plants get to more sunlight. So definitely a lot of selective pressure for this. Definitely upgrades. And again, all further groups are going to be tracheophytes. Another kind of random thing about them, the sporophyte's now going to be prominent. So in the bryophytes, the gametophyte was prominent, but now the main plant is going to be the sporophyte, and the gametophyte is going to be a smaller structure and sometimes microscopic, but the sporophyte is now prominent from everything here on out. Now, within Tracheophyta, there are seed plants and seedless plants. So yeah, kind of a spoiler for our next evolutionary innovation is going to be seeds. But here we can see vascular plants, seedless plants, seed plants. Let's talk about seedless plants first. And there are indeed two groups of seedless vascular land plants. These two groups are called lycophytes and pterophytes. So something about both of these groups. So these seedless vascular plants, even though they have all that cool stuff we just talked about, having vascular tissue and all of these things, the seedless vascular plants still need to swim to get to the egg, or the sperm need to still swim to get to their egg. So once again, just like these bryophytes, these seedless vascular plants have to live in environments that are humid or moist or where it rains a lot. So that's still a limitation for them. So what can we say about them? Let's start with lycophytes. Lycophytes are seedless vascular plants that are also known as fern allies. They're not real ferns. I guess they're called allies because they're closely related to ferns. Weird word, but it is what it is. Lycophytes include club mosses, which not to be confused with like actual moss, which was this bryophyte from the previous lecture here. These are club mosses. They're quite, it's hard to see the scale, but these club mosses are a good deal bigger than bryophyte mosses. Remember, vascular tissue allows for larger plants. They're still not huge, but they're bigger than moss fuzz, quillworts, and spike mosses. Again, the word moss is just kind of thrown around a lot. So I think all I want you to know about lycophytes is they're fern allies. They got club mosses, quillworts, and spike mosses. Honestly, the much larger group of seedless vascular plants is pterophytes. The silent P here, pterophytes. This includes whisk ferns, horsetails, and the big one, ferns. So this is by far the biggest group of seedless vascular plants, and they're part of this pterophytes group. In fact, ferns are so big, I want to talk a little bit more about them in particular. Ferns have leaves that distinctly develop as these structures called fiddleheads, which unfurl as they grow. So yeah, you can see them, curled up like this, like the head of a fiddle, I suppose. That sort of unfurl is the best word for this as they grow out. Apparently, some of these things are edible if you pick them at just the right time. You can cook them up like a green bean. But anyway, that's a distinctive fern thing. And there's something to point out about their life cycle. So again, this is haplodiplontic. All of these land plants have a haplodiplontic life cycle. So what we're about to see with ferns is really just this. Unfortunately, the best figure I have kind of flips things. So our generic one had the gametophyte on top and the sporophyte on bottom. This one's just kind of upside down. So the sporophyte is on top and the gametophyte is on the bottom, but we still see that it's a pretty straightforward cycle. So let's start with the sporophyte. Sporophyte makes spores. Remember, these are seedless vascular plants, so there aren't going to be any flowers, there aren't going to be any real seeds. Instead, these spores are made on these structures called sporangia, also known as sori. Let's zoom in. Here they are. So if you look at the underside of a fern leaf, you're going to see these dots. These are structures called sori that make spores. Because remember, the sporophyte makes spores. That's its whole job. So sporophyte releases haploid spores from these sori located underneath the leaves. Next, the spores are going to grow up into a gametophyte. And this is the part that's kind of weird. This gametophyte exists independent of the sporophyte that created it. And it's also capable of photosynthesis. So these are kind of like two separate plants from one another. Again, when we look at other groups of plants, we're going to see how atypical this is. But yeah, the gametophyte is capable of living and growing and dividing and doing photosynthesis completely on its own. It's still much smaller than the sporophyte when it reaches its adult size, but it's a lot more independent than the gametophytes of other plants we're going to see. So spores grow into a gametophyte, and notable, photosynthetic, exists independent of the sporophyte. Now, within that gametophyte, we're going to have egg, we're going to have sperm, they're going to come together, and you're going to get a sporophyte. The sporophyte grows out of the gametophyte wherever that fertilization happened to occur. So gametophyte produces sexual structures and gametes, of course, and after fertilization, the sporophyte grows out of the gametophyte. So again, pretty typical haplodiplontic life cycle, just a couple of different things. So that's all I want to say about seedless vascular plants. Of course, our next major evolutionary innovation is going to be seeds, and your textbook has decided to put these in separate chapters. So technically we're moving to another chapter here as we talk about seed plants, but really it's just continuing on with this same phylogeny here. Seed plants are going to be up here. Another division thing. Division spermatophyta, also known as seed plants. And here they are on this one. They're seed plants. Remember, these are also vascular plants, and they're also land plants. So what can we say about seed plants in general? Well, in seed plants, the sporophyte is dominant. And unlike ferns, where the gametophyte was, something you could see with the naked eye and existed, and did photosynthesis, now that we're talking about seed plants, the gametophyte is microscopic. You cannot see it with the naked eye. It's not a free living structure. We'll see what these look like in just a second. But important to note, sporophyte dominant, gametophyte even less prominent. So There are a couple of evolutionary innovations that we see in seed plants. Um, Obviously, seeds are one of these, but another one is pollen. So, pollen comes in all different cool looking shapes here. Pollen is the male gametophyte. Remember, I mentioned that the gametophyte was going to be microscopic, and yeah, pollen is really small. Pollen is not plant sperm. Pollen is a male gametophyte that produces sperm. Pollen obviously released from the sporophyte, the prominent plant, and can be dispersed by wind. Um, this is huge. Remember, for the longest time, our land plants, whether they were vascular or non vascular, they had flagella on their sperm. I'm going back to ferns here. They had flagella on their sperm. They had to live in humid environments or places where it rained a lot. They had to swim to reach to their eggs. Being able to use the wind to disperse pollen, which makes sperm, is huge. These plants no longer require water for fertilization to happen, which again, it's a big deal. Pollen's a major evolutionary innovation in these seed plants. The other major evolutionary innovation in seed plants is obviously seeds. So the job of a seed is to protect the sporophyte embryo and delay germination. So again, if I can go back to ferns, again, there's a compare and contrast happening here. As soon as this fertilization happens in a fern, for example, that's going to grow into a zygote, that's going to grow into a sporophyte, and it's just got to do its division. If things dry up or if things go bad, if there's not a lot of sunlight at the moment, that zygote's going to die. It's just not going to grow into a sporophyte. Whenever fertilization happens, division's just going to go on immediately afterwards. And there's no protection for this zygote as it goes through its first few divisions. However, the seed is a structure, looking at a couple of different seeds here, that offers protection not just for a zygote, but for a fairly well-developed embryo. So within the parent, there are going to be a lot of cell division. This is a baby plant within this seed that has leaves, has the beginnings of a root, has a pretty well-developed system that's ready to go. So it's great protection for this sporophyte embryo, letting it survive whatever harsh environmental conditions may exist and grow and start its divisions again as soon as things are perfect. So the seed also allows for delayed germination. The seeds can be released when they're ready, and then the embryo can come out of the seed and start growing as soon as conditions are perfect. Again, this is a huge upgrade to other plants. It has contributed to these seed plants being way more successful than any other group of plants in the vast majority of ecosystems. So within seed plants, we see that there are two groups, gymnosperms and angiosperms. Let's talk about gymnosperms first. So you see the word gym here as part of the name. You may think of a gymnasium, a place where, sports and exercise and stuff happens, gym class, whatever. Well, it is referring to a gymnasium, but it's referring to an ancient Greek gymnasium where they like to exercise naked. So gym technically means naked. Gymnosperms means naked seeds. Why are they naked seeds? Well, their seeds are naked because they don't have an ovary surrounding them. This means no fruit or flowers. That's going to be our next innovation in the other group. But for gymnosperms, they've got seeds, but no fruit or flowers to surround these seeds. So they're not completely naked. These seeds can be surrounded by modified leaves called sporophylls. And we can take a bunch of these sporophylls and arrange them together around a stalk to form a structure called a strobilus. If this is some weird terminology here, a bunch of sporophylls and a strobilus, here's a visual of what this can look like. It's just a pine cone, or it's not always a pine cone, but this is a pretty typical strobilus structure. If we want to look at one that's a little better labeled, yeah, this is a female cone, a female strobilus. It's got a bunch of these sporophylls, and each one is protecting a seed. So, yeah, modified leaves called sporophylls surround the seeds. A bunch of sporophylls together is called a strobilus. A pine cone is an example of this. Importantly, though, they don't all look like pine cones. Sometimes this strobilus can look a little bit like a fruit, like this juniper berry here. It's even called a juniper quote-unquote berry. Remember, these gymnosperms have no fruit and no flowers. The fact that these cones, these strobili, look like a fruit is an example of, it's been a while, convergent evolution, two separate groups of plants evolving a similar kind of structure, but we know this is not a real fruit. If we look closely at how it developed, it didn't come from an ovary layer surrounding the seed. It's just a cone, basically, a strobilus, that has evolved to resemble a berry, has evolved to resemble a fruit. Okay, so another thing we can say about gymnosperms is that some of these are monoecious and some of these are dioecious. So these are both in the key terms. This is about reproductive organs. So without even reading the key terms, we can maybe guess what this means just by looking at the prefixes here. Monoecious. Mono means one. This means there's only one type of plant. If there's only one type of plant, that means there must not be male and female plants. You have to have male and female structures on the same individual. And di means two. That means there are two types of plants. Distinct male plants with male gametophyte producing structures and female plants with female gametophyte producing structures. So the key terms say exactly that. But yeah, mono means one type of plant, di means two types of plants. Now, within gymnosperms, we've got several phyla. Let's start with the easiest one, the most common one, or at least the one that we're probably the most familiar with, Coniferophyta. Members of phylum Coniferophyta are known as conifers. And so, yep, this includes our pine trees that we see all around north central Louisiana. There are other conifers. Yeah, the juniper berries here, that's also a conifer. These are all monoecious. So this is not a male pine tree. This is not a female pine tree. It makes male structures and female structures, but it's just one type of tree. Again, that means monoecious. Now, most of these conifers are evergreen, meaning they don't lose all their leaves at once, usually in the fall. But I did say most. There are some conifers like the larch that do lose all their leaves in the fall. This is termed deciduous. So most of these gymnosperms are evergreen. Some of them are deciduous. They lose all their leaves annually. I don't have much more to say. Again, we know conifers. We see these pretty much every single day. Let's look at the other phyla of gymnosperms. So next up, we've got Cycadophyta. Members of this phylum are called cycads. Whoa, okay, that's a heck of a cone. Yeah, cycads have this distinctive, incredibly large, usually single strobilus in the center of the plant. Their leaves kind of look like a palm tree, I guess. Here's palm tree for comparison. Not the same. This is convergent evolution. These are not even closely related to palm trees. These are going to be the other group of seed plants. They convergently evolved similar looking leaves. So these giant cones, oh yeah, here's a human hand for, sense of scale on these massive cones here. And, this one's labeled female and male. Yes, these are monoecious plants. They have distinct male and female individuals that only make female cones or only make male cones. And if you were to crack one of these open on a female cone, you see these things that kind of look like fruit. That's more convergent evolution. Again, there's no ovary or flowers or whatever, but yeah, kind of look like fruit. So in summary, these palm tree looking leaves are called pinnate. They have these large pinnate leaves, large cones, and they're dioecious. Sorry, did I say monoecious a second ago? They're dioecious. That means two types of thing, distinct male and female. Our third phylum is called phylum Ginkgophyta. So these are known as ginkgos. Hey, here's a ginkgo tree on Tech Campus. Maybe you can find this based on what you see in the background, the clock tower, the student center. There used to be a couple more that aren't around anymore. But yeah, there's a ginkgo on Tech Campus. Even though this represents a phylum, there's only one living member of this entire phylum, Ginkgo biloba. And we can see a male ginkgo here, producing male pollen-producing structures, and here's a female ginkgo here, producing a seed surrounded by, once again, what looks an awful lot like a fruit, but it's evolutionarily not really a fruit. Because we see male and female individuals, this is dioecious. These are also deciduous. So if it gets around to a winter quarter when you're taking this class, maybe find this ginkgo tree, see that it's lost all of its leaves. And these are common as ornamental plants because they're very tolerant of pollution. Not terribly polluted around Tech Campus, but yeah, they're common city trees because they can survive horrible bus type pollution. Side note, these are dioecious, which means they're distinct male and female individuals. I don't know whether this is a male or female tree or not, but they don't reach sexual maturity for like 20 or 30 years. So it'll be a while before anyone knows whether this is a male tree or a female tree. But yeah, there is one on Tech Campus. Okay, one more phylum of gymnosperms. Gnetophyta. It's a silent G here, Gnetophyta. Members of this phylum are called gnetophytes. Man, this is a grab bag of stuff. So we've got some interesting members here. Some look very plain and not very distinctive. The Welwitschia is this massive plant that only exists in the desert of Namibia. Very cool plant. And then some stuff in the U.S., the American Southwest, this ephedra. These red structures are cones, not fruit. Again, a lot of these things seem to produce cones that look like fruits but aren't really. It's hard to say anything about gnetophytes, and so all I'm going to say is that they're very diverse members within this phylum. Okay. The last thing I want to do talking about gymnosperms is go through another life cycle. And we've seen so many of these. Remember, this is still just a haplodiplontic life cycle. All this terminology, sporophyte, gametophyte, all of that stuff, just a little bit more specific to use our gymnosperm terminology. So let's start with this top panel here, where we've got the sporophyte, the mature tree. Again, the sporophyte is the prominent form, making female strobili, which make female gametophytes, and male strobili, male cones, that make male gametophytes. So, yep, summarize this. On the sporophyte, parentheses tree, male strobili, parentheses cones, produce male gametophytes, parentheses pollen. Female strobili produce female gametophytes, parentheses, I think this is a new term, it's called an ovule. That's the female gametophyte. Okay, so we got male gametophyte, we got female gametophyte, they got to get together. We're going to use the wind to do that. So pollen is dispersed by wind. A common sight around here at certain times of the year. Most of this pollen doesn't go anywhere useful. Again, it's kind of a shotgun approach to just releasing a ton of pollen. Most of it's not going to do anything, but some of it is going to make it to the female cone. Pollen that reaches the female cone develops what's called a pollen tube and delivers sperm to fertilize the egg and form the zygote. So here's the pollen grain, here's the pollen tube, there's a sperm coming down, and here's the cell it's going to fertilize. Interestingly, 2 of these sperm are delivered, but only one of them is required to do this fertilization. There's sort of a backup here. Now, after this fertilization occurs, we have our diploid zygote. It's going to grow and develop into an embryo, a sporophyte now. Again, this is like a baby tree. It's gone through many cell divisions. This is a multicellular, still pretty small, but a multicellular diploid structure. Again, a sporophyte, a small tree inside of this seed. And there's another cell from the female gametophyte that's going to divide to form something called endosperm. So this haploid cell from the female gametophyte is not fertilized, so it's still haploid. It forms endosperm. What is endosperm? Well, we can see this here. Endosperm, parentheses, stored food. So this is not part of the sporophyte. It's not part of the baby plant. It's something that surrounds it within the seed. And when it's time for germination, this endosperm is used to fuel germination. So that's happening here during seed development as well. Endosperm acts as a food reserve for that embryo. And yeah, once the seed is ready to go, they're dispersed and they can grow into a new tree. Now, cones are not maybe the best at seed dispersal. I mean, I guess these things roll around in the wind pretty well, so these things can be blown far away from the tree, but we're going to see in our next group much better ways of trying to disperse these seeds. But the cones do their job. Seeds are dispersed, they grow into a tree. Speaking of seeing better ways of seed dispersal, that is something that we're going to do in the next recorded lecture as we pick things up talking about angiosperms. But for now, this is the end of recorded lecture 2-3.